They thought they were helping a little old lady. They had no idea what was waiting inside. Part 1. The Kindness of Strangers. The town of Cedarbrook was the kind of place people used as a simile for safety. It was as sleepy as Cedarbrook, or quiet as a Cedarbrook Sunday sort of town. Its streets, lined with oak trees that formed a canopy of green in the summer and a tunnel of fire in the fall, were peaceful to the point of monotony. Children still rode their bikes until the streetlights flickered on, and neighbors borrowed cups of sugar without a second thought. It was this ingrained, unshakable trust that Arthur and Eleanor Pride exploited with chilling precision for over 2 decades. To the outside world, they were a quaint, if slightly pitiable pair. Eleanor Pride, a widow in her late 70s, was a fragile sparrow of a woman. She had a permanent, watery-eyed smile and a tremor in her hands that made her seem perpetually on the verge of dropping her grocery bags. She was a fixture at the local market, the bus station, and the library, always dressed in a faded floral dress, her white hair a wispy cloud around her kindly face. Then there was her son, Arthur. He was a large, soft-spoken man in his 50s, who most people knew only in passing. He worked a night shift as a janitor at the community college, a job that suited his solitary nature. He was often seen tending to their overgrown garden, his massive frame moving with a surprising, gentle grace. He was quiet, polite, and utterly forgettable. The perfect ghost. No one knew that the small, clapboard house at 1421 Oak Lane, with its peeling paint and wild, thorny rose bushes, was a charnel house. They didn't know that the tremor in Eleanor's hands was the only genuine thing about her, or that Arthur's quietness was the silence of a deep, still lake, hiding monstrous things beneath its surface. The town saw a mother and son struggling to get by. They never saw the predators. The method was deceptively simple, a predator's masterpiece of social engineering. Eleanor was the anglerfish, her light of perceived helplessness glowing in the comfortable dark of Cedarbrook's trust. She would go to the supermarket or the bus stop, her reusable bags filled just enough to be cumbersome. She'd spot a likely target, a college student, a young mother with a single bag of her own, a kind-looking retiree, or a hitchhiker passing through. Her approach was always the same. "Oh, excuse me, young man. My car is in the shop, and my son is at work. I live just a few blocks away, on Oak Lane. Would you be an absolute dear and help an old lady with her bags?" The request was a small stone dropped into the pond of human decency. To refuse was to feel a pang of guilt, to feel churlish and uncharitable. In Cedarbrook, you helped your neighbors. And so they would come. They would walk beside the shuffling Eleanor Pride, making small talk, feeling the warm glow of a good deed done. They would follow her up the cracked concrete path, through the creaking screen door, and into the dim, cluttered living room that always smelled of mothballs, stale tea, and beneath it all, a faint, sharp odor of bleach and something else, something metallic and unclean. "Just set them on the table, thank you so much. Arthur, we have a helper." That was the cue. Arthur would emerge from the kitchen or the hallway, his bulk blocking the light. His smile was always in place, but it never reached his eyes, which were the flat, cold gray of a winter sky. "Thank you for helping my mother," he'd say, his voice a low rumble. "Let me get you a glass of water for your trouble." It was the last moment of normalcy. The door would be closed. The lock, a heavy, old-fashioned deadbolt, would slide into place with a soft final thud. The transformation in Eleanor was instantaneous. The frail, kindly old woman would straighten up, the tremor vanishing from her hands. Her watery eyes would harden into chips of flint. The performance was over. For the person standing in the living room, holding a now sweaty glass of water, the world would tilt on its axis. The fear would start as a cold trickle in their stomach, then flood their system as Arthur's polite mask dissolved, revealing the vacancy beneath. A void so profound, it was more terrifying than any expression of rage. Part 2. The Slow Creep of Shadows. The police, when they finally became involved, found nothing for a long, long time. The disappearances were a slow, creeping poison, a trickle of lost souls over 20 years that few thought to connect. A college student named Chloe Mitchell was reported missing after failing to return from the grocery store. A retired mailman, Frank O'Malley, vanished after telling his wife he was helping a nice old lady with her shopping. A young couple, Mark and Jenny, disappeared on a Saturday afternoon. Their last known sighting was at the farmer's market. They were just a few of the names that would later fill a corkboard in the Major Crimes Unit. Detective Maria Rodriguez, a transplant from Chicago who had come to Cedarbrook for its peace, felt the first icy fingers of dread after the 5th missing person report in as many years. In a big city, people vanished for 100 reasons. In a town like this, they didn't just evaporate. But the leads were ghosts. There were no patterns, no connections.
Her first break came from a sharp-eyed records clerk, cross-referencing cold cases. She noted that Frank O'Malley's credit card had been used at a gas station 2 towns over, days after he vanished. The man on the security footage was large, wearing a hoodie, his face obscured. But he was driving Frank's car. It was a mistake, Arthur's one careless error in a 20-year reign of terror. The second break was more visceral. A local farmer, walking his property line where it bordered the woods behind Oak Lane, found a patch of disturbed earth. The soil was dark and rich, unnaturally so, and scattered around it were several small white fragments that looked, to his horror, like pieces of bone. He called the police. The forensic anthropologist confirmed they were human. The search area widened, but the dense woods and the Pride family's reputation as quiet recluses kept the investigation at a frustrating distance. There was no direct link. Meanwhile, inside 1421 Oak Lane, the grim routine continued. The basement, which Arthur had converted with soundproofing and a large sloped drain in the center of the concrete floor, was his workshop. It was here that the final, horrific acts took place. Arthur approached his work with a dispassionate, methodical precision. He saw it not as murder, but as a form of harvest. Eleanor was his indispensable partner. Her small, steady hands, so deceptive in public, were skilled with a scalpel. She knew anatomy from her brief time as a nurse's aide in her youth, knowledge she now perverted to assist in the efficient processing of what Arthur called the stock. She would help bundle the remains. What Arthur chose to keep for his special meals was wrapped and stored in the large basement freezer. The rest was dealt with systematically. They used 5-gallon buckets, the kind from any hardware store. Eleanor would scrub them spotless after each use, but over the years, faint, rusty stains had become ingrained in the plastic around the rims. Under the cover of darkness, often while Arthur was supposedly at his night job, she would take these buckets out to the garden. She would feed the rose bushes, burying the contents deep within the soil, nourishing the blood-red blooms that were the envy of the neighborhood. The cycle of life and death in that garden was a perverted, secret thing.
Part 3. The One Who Got Away. The break that would finally shatter the case open came from an unexpected source. A young man named Leo was new in town, a guitarist trying to make it as a session musician. He was lonely, eager to connect, and perhaps a little too trusting. When the sweet old lady with the heavy bags asked for help outside the music store, he didn't hesitate. The walk to 1421 Oak Lane was pleasant. The house felt still and heavy, but Leo chalked it up to an old building. He set the bags on the table as instructed. When Arthur Pride appeared, Leo felt a primal jolt of unease. The man was off. His smile was a gash on his face, empty and wrong. When Arthur offered the water, Leo's instincts screamed. He pretended to take a sip, his eyes darting around the room. He saw the heavy bolts on the inside of the front door. He saw the lack of photographs, the strange, almost surgical cleanliness of certain surfaces amidst the general clutter, and he saw Eleanor's face change, the kindly mask dropping away to reveal something ancient and cruel. "I really should be going," Leo said, his voice tighter than he intended. "Oh, but you must stay for dinner," Arthur said, his voice still a polite rumble, but his eyes were fixed on Leo with a terrifying intensity. "It's a family recipe. My specialty. We so rarely have guests who appreciate it." The word family recipe landed with a sickening weight. Leo's mind, fueled by a lifetime of crime documentaries and a musician's sensitivity to subtext, connected the dots with horrifying speed. The disappearances, this house, the stories he'd half heard, the specialty. He knew, with a certainty that turned his blood to ice, that if he ate that meal, he would be consuming a piece of the people who had stood where he was standing. He was being invited to cross a line from which there was no return, to become a participant in his own damnation, to be broken in spirit before he was broken in body. "I really should be going," Leo said, his voice tighter than he intended. "Oh, but you must stay for dinner," Arthur said, his voice still a polite rumble, but his eyes were fixed on Leo with a terrifying intensity. "It's a family recipe. My specialty. We so rarely have guests who appreciate it." The word family recipe landed with a sickening weight. Leo's mind, fueled by a lifetime of crime documentaries and a musician's sensitivity to subtext, connected the dots with horrifying speed. The disappearances, this house, the stories he'd half heard, the specialty. He knew, with a certainty that turned his blood to ice, that if he ate that meal, he would be consuming a piece of the people who had stood where he was standing.
He was being invited to cross a line from which there was no return, to become a participant in his own damnation, to be broken in spirit before he was broken in body. "I really should be going," Leo said, his voice tighter than he intended. "No, thank you. I'm a vegetarian. Strict." For a second, Arthur just stared, as if his programming had encountered a bug it couldn't process. The smile tightened, then a flicker of impatience, then anger crossed his face. It was the opening Leo needed. He didn't try for the front door. He turned and sprinted deeper into the house, toward the kitchen, a decision born of pure panic. He burst through the swinging door and found himself in a scene from a nightmare. The kitchen was obscenely normal, except for the large, industrial-sized freezer humming in the corner. Its lid was open, and inside, wrapped in pristine white butcher paper, were parcels that were unmistakably not from any grocery store. The shape of one, the size and contour of a human thigh, was seared into Leo's brain. On the stove, a large pot simmered, filling the room with a rich, meaty aroma that now made Leo's stomach clench in revolt. On the counter, next to a set of impeccably clean, sharp knives, sat a stack of those 5-gallon buckets. He heard a heavy tread behind him. Arthur Pride stood in the doorway, his face now a blank slate of murderous intent. The politeness was gone. What was left was pure, unadulterated hunger. "You should have just eaten," Arthur growled. Leo grabbed the first thing he could find, a heavy cast-iron skillet from the stove, and swung it with all his strength. It connected with the side of Arthur's head with a dull, sickening crunch. The big man staggered, grunting in surprise more than pain, a line of blood trickling from his temple. Leo didn't wait. He shoved past him, back into the living room, where Eleanor stood, not with a weapon, but with a phone, her finger poised over the keypad. He realized with a fresh wave of horror that she was prepared to call the police on him, to report a home invasion, to complete the narrative they had perfected. He didn't stop. He yanked open the front door. The deadbolt, in their arrogance, and because of his unexpected flight into the kitchen, was still undrawn, and exploded out into the blindingly normal Cedarbrook afternoon. He ran, his heart hammering against his ribs, the smell of that stew clinging to his clothes, the image of the freezer and the buckets burned onto the back of his eyelids. He didn't stop until he crashed through the doors of the police station, babbling hysterical about the Pride House, the stew, the freezer, the buckets. Detective Rodriguez listened, her face growing paler with every gasped-out word. This was more than a missing persons case now. This was the break they needed.
Part 4. The House on Oak Lane. The raid on 1421 Oak Lane was executed with swift, silent precision. The evidence they uncovered would haunt the town for generations. The basement was confirmed as a killing floor. The drains and tarps told a clear story. But it was the attic that revealed the staggering, soul-crushing scale. It wasn't filled with Christmas decorations or old clothes. It was an archive of the dead. Box after box, neatly labeled, contained personal effects: wallets, purses, jewelry, keys, and clothing. Jeans, dresses, t-shirts, jackets. The official count of victims based on DNA evidence and identifiable items would be set at 20. But the detectives on the scene knew better. The sheer volume of clothing, 84 distinct, unidentifiable items, pointed to a number far greater. A silent chorus of the vanished, whose voices had been stolen years, even decades ago. Arthur Pride's meticulous journals, written in a cramped, precise hand, detailed his harvest. He wrote not with remorse, but with the clinical passion of a gourmand, describing flavors and textures in a code that, once broken, revealed the full scope of his cannibalism. His motivation was a twisted fusion of dominance and a warped sense of Epicurean artistry. He believed he was consuming their essence. And the ultimate act of control, the final violation he detailed with relish, was the communion, forcing new victims to partake in a meal made from the remains of the previous one, shattering their humanity before he ended their lives. Eleanor was not a passive accomplice. The journals and the physical evidence confirmed she was the operational manager of this house of horrors. She helped with the processing and was the one who meticulously cleaned the buckets and managed the grisly disposal process in the garden. She saw it as providing for her son, catering to his unique needs, and protecting their twisted symbiosis. The trial was a national spectacle. Cedarbrook lost its innocence forever. Arthur and Eleanor Pride were both given multiple life sentences without the possibility of parole. They never expressed a shred of remorse. Leo moved away a month after the trial. He changed his name, his number, his life. He couldn't stand the smell of cooking meat.
He jumped at the sight of plastic buckets. The horror of what he had escaped, the knowledge of the communion he had narrowly avoided, was a constant, waking nightmare. The house at 1421 Oak Lane stands empty now, a rotting wooden skull on a sunny street. The town tried to have it demolished, but legal red tape and its macabre notoriety keep it standing. But the most enduring, chilling legacy of the Pride House was a new, unspoken rule that settled over Cedarbrook and spread via whispered warnings, a rule parents now taught their children, a rule people silently repeated to themselves when faced with a simple request for help. Be kind, the rule went, but be smart. Trust your instincts, look past the smile, and never, ever go inside. The roses in the garden, fertilized by unspeakable things, have never bloomed more brightly. A cruel and lasting monument to the evil that can fester behind the most ordinary of doors.